update on our workshops. Our group follows the 12 traditions. We stick to our singleness of purpose, and we ask everyone to please refrain from the use of profanity when sharing. The 7 traditions states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. The contributions help to cover the group's expenses, but the 7th tradition is more than simply paying for rent and other group expenses. It is both a privilege and a responsibility of individual groups and members to ensure that our organization at every level remains forever self-supporting and free of outside influences that might divert us from our primary purpose. The monetary amount of each contribution is secondary to the spiritual connection that joins us in unity with AA groups around the world. 7 tradition contributions can be made using Venmo to @Threads of Recovery -1058, and these details are in chat. This is an open meeting. Open meetings are available to anyone interested in Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery from alcoholism. Non-alcoholics may attend open meetings as observers. Okay. And presenting on the 9th installment of the 2 magnificent standards and 7 attributes, the attribute of consideration, step 9. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Bill H.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Bill. I'm an alcoholic. Well, for those of you in the United States of America, happy Memorial Day. For those of you around the world, happy Monday. And I want to let the tie story out early today. You see some lovely flowers on this tie, right? You see those? My wife thinks they may be poppies. I don't know. I'm not a flower guy. But I want to thank Sally T. This came in the mail Saturday. God bless her. I don't know if she's on here yet, but thank you, Sally. And it turns out Memorial Day used to be called Decoration Day in the States in the late 1850s after the so-called Civil War. Well, there's an oxymoron, Civil War. The decision was made to honor veterans who had died in the service of freedom, and they began decorating graves with flowers. So it became Memorial Day later on, but it's a beautiful tie, and it seemed like a bit of a stretch, but that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. I am Bill. I am an alcoholic, and I have a sobriety date. Believe it or not, I have not had a drink of alcohol or any other mood-changing or mind-altering chemical since the 18th of March, 1981. And I will tell you, I think I'm off to a pretty good start. I think I've made a good beginning. I think I've laid a good foundation. And as we heard earlier today, it's progress, not perfection. I'm glad you all are here. I especially welcome the folks that are at this Threads workshop for the first time. And of course, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. For everyone, we're welcoming back. We're going to continue our study today of the 12 steps. This particular day, we're going to be talking about step 9. And to get there, we're going to do a brief review of the first 8 steps to see how we got to step 9, particularly through the lens we're using. We're looking through a sort of an unusual lens in this series. As Mike's already said, we're looking at 2 magnificent standards, humility and responsibility. Humility and responsibility. We're going to see where those came from in a minute. We're also looking at how 7 of the attributes that result in our lives, that result in changing our lives, actually making us different people. Going to look at 7 attributes as we go through this as well. And just a reminder, we can help each other read the book. And we are going to be in the big book today. If you have a big book, we're going to pick up again on page 76, where you find not only step 6 and 7, but step 8 and the beginning of step 9. So we'll be picking up on page 76 today for those of you who want to find that in your book. And we can read the book together, and we can help each other read the book together, because there were times in my recovery when I didn't want to read the book. I just was tired of the book. It's the same old thing. There's so much repetition. I've heard all this before. And I've come to understand when I hear me saying that to me, or if I hear you saying it to me, or if I hear me saying it to you, there's a drunk trap. That's my I know better, I know enough, I know it all, already getting in the way of the fact that progress, not perfection. I don't know it all, and I need a lot of repetition. So we read the book over and over because we need to hear it over and over. And then we help each other try to understand the book. I don't know about you, but I have misunderstood the book once or twice. I have read the book and absolutely felt certain I had a conclusion. I have this thing locked in, and I'll go to a meeting and say, I read this, and here's what it means. And after they stop laughing, Louise, after they stop laughing, I realize, well, there may be more than one way to see this. It doesn't mean my understanding is necessarily wrong, but we help each other understand the breadth and depth of the spiritual message in the big book after we understand the breadth and depth of the alcoholism problem. Because if I don't have the problem, I don't need your solution. But reading the book and understanding the book still don't matter a whole lot if I don't become willing. If I don't become willing, with your help and with God's help, to carry away from this meeting today the willingness to try to apply what we talk about here, what we read about here, what we come to understand together here. Application is where the payoff is, and we're really going to see that. We're really going to see application and the payoff of application today in step 9. So where did this 2 magnificent standards, humility and responsibility, come from? Well, what a surprise. It came from Bill W. There he is again. Boy, he shows up a lot, doesn't he? In a talk he gave at a General Service Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous in Toronto, Canada in 1965, Bill said these words, and I quote, "As we know, all AA progress can be reckoned in terms of just 2 words, humility and responsibility. Our whole spiritual development can be accurately measured by our degree of adherence to these magnificent standards. Ever deepening humility, accompanied by an ever greater willingness to accept and to act upon. Application, you see, willingness to accept and act upon clear-cut obligations. These are truly our touchstones for all growth in the life of the Spirit. They hold up to us the very essence of right being and right doing. Got to be right on the inside before I can do right on the outside. It is by them, it is by humility and responsibility that we are enabled to find and do God's will. And I would suggest to you that steps 1 through 6 produce enough humility in us to try to fulfill our real purpose, which we're going to see today on page 77. Early in the step 9 discussion in the big book, our real purpose is disclosed to us. Page 77 will tell us our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be, before we can do, to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And remember, the basic ingredient of all humility is much simpler than I used to make it. Oh, if you talk about humility, you must not have it. You've heard that before. That's nonsense. It's just Flat nonsense. In the Alcoholics Anonymous 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, the 12 and 12, on page 72 is this definition of humility. And I quote, "That basic ingredient of all humility, a desire to seek and do God's will." I have a desire to seek and do God's will today. I really do. I hope you do too. Don't have to know how to do that. Just have a desire to seek and to do God's will. That's the essence of humility. Also, in the 12 and 12, a little further on page 76, is this application of the definition of humility. Humility is to move out from ourselves toward others and toward God. Boy, are we going to see that in application today in step 9, moving out from ourselves toward others and toward God. And we're going to see how it's with God's help. Also, the responsibility piece, interestingly enough, was presented in that same convention in Toronto in 1965. A former trustee by the name of Al S. made these remarks: "I am responsible." This is a quote from his speech that day. "I am responsible. When anyone, anywhere, reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, in other words, making the recovery program available and possible for anyone who walks in the door or anyone who logs on the Zoom room, I'm responsible to do my part to help carry the message of our spiritual awakening. And I would suggest to you our responsibility to do that grows. Certainly after the first 6 steps, it really grows in steps 7 through 12. We become responsible to share our spiritual awakening with other alcoholics, particularly, and to try to practice these principles in all our affairs. Quick review of our study so far in this series. We've seen how 7 attributes of the 12-step spiritual principles enable our personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. By the way, I didn't make up that definition. Did you hear me say personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism? That definition in the 4th edition of the Big Book is on page 567 in Appendix 2, but it's been there since the 2nd edition, probably the 3rd or 4th printing of the 1st edition, now that I think about it. That description of the spiritual awakening and so on and so forth. But notice that very clear, simple definition. Personality change, sufficient, not perfect, not complete, not walking on water here, but a personality change sufficient to bring about my recovery, your recovery, our recovery from alcoholism. Just a reminder, alcoholism is more than getting drunk when I drink. Physical allergy guarantees I take the first drink, I'm going to get drunk. Alcoholism is more than the mental obsession. It says, I'm going to figure out how to take a few drinks and control it this time. That mental obsession that continues to believe that lie and pursue that illusion, sometimes to the gates of death and insanity itself. Or insanity and death, whichever order you want to encounter those in. Personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism is much more than just not taking the first drink, although not taking the first drink is vital. As I've told you before, I've tried to work 12 steps drinking. I've tried to work 12 steps sober. It's worked a lot better when I started trying to do them not taking the first drink. What are the 7 attributes we've been looking at in this study? Well, honesty is one of them. We certainly grow in our honesty in steps 1, 2, and 3, and honesty continues forward. Forgiveness grows in us in steps 4 and 5, and we're going to recall today, even though we're talking about step 9, we're going to recall how forgiveness for us began back in step 4. In the step 4 prayers in the Big Book, forgiveness actually begins. And obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious. Let me state it for the record. Forgiveness definitely continues forward. In fact, forgiveness is huge in the recovery life. I didn't used to be very happy about that. I'm filled with joy today, and I want to share some of that with you today. Trust. Trust is an attribute. It certainly grows in us by the time we do 6 and 7. And that continues forward. Consideration for others grows in us, particularly in step 8 and 9, not just because we read about it, not just because we prayed about it way back in step 4. Even when we come to understand how important consideration is, we get to live in application of consideration in steps 8 and 9. We're going to see that today. Next time, we'll pick up with step 10 and step 11, and love and tolerance are 2 more attributes we're going to look at next time, although we're probably already experiencing some love and tolerance right now. You stayed on this meeting for already 20 minutes. You've been listening to me already for, 15 minutes. You got a little love and tolerance going right there. The ladies at the Sis House, wave at me. Sis House, I want to be sure you're paying attention. When I talk about love and tolerance, Debbie in the Sis House, Debbie, I think of love and tolerance when I think of you. Is that okay? Amen. Amen. Bravo. Good. And then, of course, when we get to step 12, we'll be talking a lot more about the attribute of service. Quick review. First 8 steps. In steps 1, 2, and 3, I become honest with myself about my alcoholism. Doesn't mean I like it. Doesn't mean I think it's fair yet. But I at least become honest enough in step 1 about my alcoholism that I see it for the problem it really is, and that when I deny that I can't take the first drink, when I deny that I can't manage my drinking after I start, my life really does become unmanageable. The reasons why don't matter. The reasons why my wife doesn't have that illness and I do don't matter. I become honest enough with myself in step 1 to admit and even accept I have alcoholism, the physical and the mental obsession. I become honest in step 2 to realize I can't outthink my alcoholism. I can't outrun my alcoholism. I can't outsleep or outwork. I can't wish away, work away, wave away my alcoholism on my own. I need help. And I become just honest enough in step 2 to concede the fact that I need help from a power greater than me. Yes, there's a power in a universe greater than the great bill. There's a power in a universe greater than the self-centered, egocentric bill. I become honest enough in step 3 to make a decision to seek out that help. So honesty is a big deal. Self-honesty, piece by piece, drip by drip, layer by layer, I become a little more honest in these first 3 steps. And in the process, and I did not know this was happening, and I promise you, you do not have to know this is happening for it to happen. In those first 3 steps, I stopped separating myself from God. I didn't know I was doing that, but I look back now and I look at the first 3 steps, and when I work those first 3 steps through the step 3 prayer on page 63 of the Big Book, which includes relieve me of the bondage of self, I have begun stopping me from separating from God. The way to have a relationship with God begins with stopping separating me from God. And that happens in the first 3 steps. I stop separating myself from God. Don't have to understand who God is. Don't have to understand what God is. I just go with the definition in step 2. In the beginning, a power greater than me that can restore me to sanity, beginning with the sanity of don't take the first drink. Step 4, I really did self-examination for the first time in my life. I began to see my selfish desires and my selfish motivations. And as we're going to see today, when we reflect back on the prayers in step 4 that are the springboard to get us all the way to step 9, it's the way the Big Book works. cumulative, repetitive. I'm going to find in the step 4 prayers, in the resentment, in the fear, in the sexual conduct inventories, I start trusting God. See, I ask God in step 3 to relieve me of the bondage of self. I start using that new relationship. Right in step 4, I ask God to save me from being angry. During the resentment inventory on page 67, the beginning of my forgiveness is God save me from being angry. We'll see how that manifests by the time we get to step 9. To become forgiving. In the fear inventory, I ask God to remove my fear so God can show me what God would have me be. So we start being different by dialing back our fear before we can become different, before we can act different. And it's no accident that those inventories come in the order they come in 4 and 5, because God saved me from being angry in step 4. God take away my fear in step 4 leads to help me see how inconsiderate I've been to others in step 4 in the sexual conduct inventory. With less anger, a little more forgiveness, with less fear, a little more trust in God, I can take the risk to stop being inconsiderate to other people. And becoming considerate begins with stop being so inconsiderate. I start to trust God in those prayers in step 4. I trust God to mold my ideals and help me live up to them in that sexual conduct inventory prayer. And in the process, I start becoming considerate. That's one of our attributes, consideration of others. In step 5, I admit my shortcomings. Now, you may say to yourself, I already admitted them to myself when I wrote them down. I didn't. I'm able to do the 4-step list and not read it. I'm able to write down the 4-step, read it, and still not let it sink in. I've got this Teflon self-will deflector. My self-will is like a Teflon deflector. Well, probably a defector too. Deflector. So when I sit there in my 5th step and share my admission of the shortcomings, reluctantly, my sponsor or spiritual advisor who's listening to my 5th step, and I admit my shortcomings, and I hear me admit my shortcomings, what have I done? I've stopped separating me from me. In the process of my step 5, I'm no longer running from the dark truth about myself. Most of me is not dark truth. Most of me is a perfectly good person. But the dark truth about me has had me so scared and running for 20 years in drinking and a year or 2 in recovery. I did not know that step 5 helped me stop separating me from me. Step 6 and 7. The word humbly is the first word in step 7. I do think the first 6 steps make me humble enough. During step 6, take responsibility to let God remove my shortcomings in step 7. I ask him to help me let go in 6. I ask God to remove them in 7. And finally, in step 8, we talked last time, I'm taking responsibility in step 8 for the harm my shortcomings have caused others. I've not gone to them yet. Step 8 was not step 9, and we talked with some folks after the meeting last week. Don't let the fear of or the anger about direct amends stop you from making your step 8 list. I want to reemphasize that today. This is crucial to recovery. If I want the promises in the big book, the promises that are made about life in recovery, life in the spiritual awakening, as we're going to see next time in step 10, we've entered the world of the spirit. If I want that kind of spiritual recovery, when I'm doing step 8, I don't worry about doing step 9. I'm taking responsibility on paper in this new relationship with God and myself. Dad, I was wrong when I did this. Mom, I was wrong when I did this. Brother, I was wrong when I did this, and the harm I caused them when I did it. I write all that stuff down so I am no longer hiding from it. Pretend you're never going to do step 9. And we're going to see how that plays out in step 9. But the mindset, the attitude, do step 8 on your kitchen table, on your desk, lock the door in the basement, turn out the light, use a little headlight, like the miners use. Nobody will know your step 8 but you. Karen, you think I'm kidding? I know people that write their step 8 in the dark. God forbid somebody should see what I wrote down. Sweetheart, I know you didn't do that. I just got a kick out of you. No, I know you wouldn't. I just got a kick out of you laughing at it. What happened in step 8? And this is really important for us to understand step 9. In step 8, I admit I take responsibility for my shortcomings and the wrong I did to others and the harm I caused others. I take responsibility first and foremost with me. Now, my sponsor may have to help me with that. But once I've written it down and look at it in step 8 and then started to pray for the willingness to make direct amends wherever possible, and we're going to talk about wherever possible today, I ask God to grant me the willingness to make the amend, whether I want to or not, whether I like to or not, whether I can imagine going to that particular mother-in-law or going to that particular aunt or going to that particular sister-in-law and making amends to her of all people, because do you know what she's done to me for 31 years? You get all those feelings in step 8. It's okay to feel them. Call your sponsor. Do some primal screaming. Buy more pillowcases so you don't get so much blood on the pillow. But it's at step 8. In the process of step 8, I become willing to make amends to those I wronged. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, because I don't know the wherever possible. But the willingness I muster in 8 gives me most of my relief, and we'll see how that plays out in a minute. So in step 9, finally, we're at step 9 today. Stephen, I told you we'd get there. In step 9, I carry forward my responsibility. I'm going to become willing to admit face to face to those I harmed that my shortcomings caused me to do them wrong, and the wrongdoing I did to them caused them harm. I'm going to become willing to go to them and say, I was wrong when I did this. I don't use my shortcomings as an excuse, but they often provide the context for the explanation. I attempt to make restitution for the loss I caused them wherever I can. At the same time, when I'm going to these people in a direct amend with that degree of personal responsibility, I'm also going to them with consideration. And there's the real challenge and the real payoff of step 9. If I've been working the 12 steps, if I've been working the first 8 steps of the 12 steps in the big book, including the prayers that begin back in step 3 and step 4. Now, you may wonder why I've emphasized including the prayers so much today, because the first 2 or 3 times I went through the steps, I skipped the prayers. I don't even know if I saw the prayers. I was in a hurry to get done. I don't know that I ever consciously thought about graduating, but I think subconsciously I thought about graduating from AA. In step 9, when I do it the big book way, I am responsible. I am responsible to make my direct amends wherever possible. We'll talk about that in a minute. I am considerate at the same time. When I make my direct amends, I am considerate not to criticize them. I am considerate not to criticize somebody else. I'm not going to take somebody else and throw them under the bus with me. I am no longer separated from God since of my work in the first 3 steps. I'm no longer separated from myself because of the work in the 4th and 5th step. And now, in step 9, coming on the heels of a willingness, prayerful step 8. I'm going to find out in step 9, I'm no longer separating myself from other people. Go back to step 2 for a minute. Restore me to sanity. Restore me to sanity begins with not taking the first drink. Restore me to sane living means I restore my relationships with God, with myself, and with others. This is, after all, a program of restoration. And it's a restoration of relationships at its most fundamental level. Because the illness of alcoholism is an illness of separation. I separated myself from others with my drinking. I separated myself from myself with my drinking. And I eventually separated myself from God in my drinking. The illness is an illness of separation. The spiritual recovery, the spiritual awakening, is a restoration of relationships. And we see this really begin to flower in step 9. And what happens for me in step 9? I wake up and realize I am free of my own shortcomings. I am free of the secrets I've been carrying ever since I was a little boy. So let's look at step 9 through the lens of 2 magnificent standards, humility and responsibility, and in this case, the attribute of consideration. First reader, page 76, please. Pick up with, now we need more action, which is immediately following the step 7 prayer, and read down to the bottom of 76, please.
Hi everybody, I'm Bill. I'm an alcoholic. Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's take a look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel different about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured, to some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach.
Thank you, William. So there's a lot there. A lot of what I missed for a long time. So let's repeat this one paragraph because this is the real jumping off point for step 9. Now we go out to our fellows. Go out from where? Well, think about this. Step 9 is the first step where we kind of go public with our recovery. Now we go out to our fellows. Look at the way he ended the step 7 prayer. Grant me strength as I go out from here. So there's a going out. There is an emerging. There is a going from the privacy of my sponsor and my home group or my meetings, going out from a relatively private spiritual awakening up to this point. We're going to go out from step 7 asking for God's strength because we're going out to our fellows and what? Try to repair the damage done in the past. The damage, not just in material terms, the damage to the relationship. Even more deeply, the damage to our ability to have a healthy relationship. Step 9 is the beginning of the healing process for I begin to learn how to have a healthy relationship with other people. Step 9 is the beginning of the healing process, for I begin to learn how to have a healthy relationship with somebody besides my sponsor and the 2 or 3 people I get along with in my home group. Don't kid me. You can sit there and be lovey-dovey with all 41 of them in your home group, but you and I both know 38 of them are rubbing you the wrong way. There's 2 or 3 that we're happy, joyous, and free with. The rest of them, I got no interest in buying them ice cream, man. And this is my home group. And by the way, I wasn't talking about newcomer. I'm talking about this morning. Well, it wasn't that bad. I was about 50-50 this morning. I've made progress. This is a remarkable sentence. Now we go out to our... Now means after step 8. After I've been praying since page 63 and page 67, which we'll look at in a minute. Now we go out from here and repair the damage done in the past. Yeah, the damage done to them. But the real healing is taking place on the inside for at least 3 reasons. Number 1, I've admitted to myself in 6 and 7, these are objectionable things and I need God's help to get over them. I've admitted to myself and my sponsor, hopefully in step 8, here's the things my shortcomings led me to do. Wrong things to others, harmful things to others. And then the third thing, I've been praying for the willingness to go admit this to these people I harmed. I've been praying for the willingness all through step 8, name by name. Not just a 10-second blanket prayer and think that sprinkles magic dust over the entire step 8 list. I pray for the willingness for every name in step 8, because this stuff isn't easy. Some of these people really harm me. 2 or 3 of these people, I go to my sponsor and say, you're kidding me. If I tell you what she did to me, you'll know why I'm never going to make an amend to her. Well, he said, well, let's do some others first and come back to her. But let's not say never. We're going to come back to that in a minute. The damage I'm repairing from the past is covered in the next sentence. We attempt to sweep away the debris, D-E-B-R-I-S, debris, which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If you don't remember what live on self-will and run the show ourselves means, go back and reread page 62, please, just one time. Just page 62 will remind you of what it used to be like, what I used to be like. The debris is in me. The brokenness is between me and the other person, but the debris, the spiritual blocking clutter, is in me. I cannot tell you why making a direct amend to a person I harmed clears away a lot of the clutter blocking my spiritual awakening. I can just tell you that it does. And I've given up trying to explain any piece of the spiritual process. It's spiritual. It's godly. It's a power greater than me at work in me. I can just tell you, it happens. When I go to somebody and make a direct amend today as part of step 10, that little bit of debris, that clutter of self-will that's blocking me from the help I need from God is swept away when I make that direct amend today. I still don't know why that works. I just know it worked. God made us this way. I didn't have to understand my air conditioner. It was warm in here when I got back from my home group this morning. I turned the thermostat down from 77 to 75. It came on. I mean, I immediately heard the blower. It came on. Pretty soon I felt cool air. I do not have to understand thermodynamics. I don't even have to understand electricity. All I do is turn the thermostat down, it gets cooler. I make a direct amend, it gets better. In here. I don't have to understand that for it to work. You with me? Our book, in the next 7 or 8 pages, our book guides me in my responsibility. I don't have to figure out how to do this. My book guides me in my responsibility for the general categories of the amends I'm going to make. It begins on the bottom part of 76 that Bill read for us a minute ago. There are categories of people that we make amends to, beginning on page 76. We're going to make direct amends to our fellows, and we're also going to see such people, the ones we harmed, the ones we did wrong to. So what are the categories? Real quickly, as we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends, that's the first category on the bottom, page 76. A lot of names on my list were business acquaintances and friends. We're going to come back to page 77 because the second category in the big book, of all these categories of amends, the second category is on page 77. Right in the middle of the page, he says, the question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. What courage. Bill admits we feel so strongly about some of these people, not because of what we did to them, but what we think they did to us, what we perceive they did to us. The man or woman we hated, the government institution we hated, the police department, in my case, the FBI, they put me in prison. I just thought they were narrow-minded and unjust. I didn't see the part I played in it for years. Don't tell the FBI that I used to hate them. Oops, I said it out loud on Zoom. They probably heard it. Oh, well, I hope they forgive me as I have forgiven them. We're going to come back to page 77. Look at page 78. We do not dodge our creditors. Yeah, alcoholics owe money. Those are actually the easiest amends to make. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense. Those are amends. It doesn't say we got caught. Become willing to make direct amends in step 8 for every criminal offense I ever committed. I may or may not make a direct amend for it in step 9, especially depending on the statute of limitations. But the criminal offenses are supposed to be all-inclusive, whether I got caught or not. How many times do you think you drove drunk? Thousands. I never got caught for drunk driving. I got caught for a lot of other stuff. I left drunk driving off my 8-step list. My sponsor helped me see my oversight. I listed drunk driving, and I've made a living amend by not driving drunk for a long time. Page 80, before taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we have to take other people into account. Chances are we have domestic troubles. Really? Page 80. And then, of course, on page 82, there's plenty we can do at home. Those are some categories to review with your sponsor. I'm not going to go into those anymore today, but I want to get to this next piece. That little template, I want to really unpack page 77 because the template, the outline, the blueprint for making a direct amend that is spelled out for the person we hated on page 77, I use as a perfect template for any amend I'm going to do. Look at how he structures this. And he overcomes my resistance to making the direct amend in the first place. He has done us more harm than we have done him. That's the first hurdle I have to get over. She did a lot more to ruin our marriage than I did. Okay, that may be true. Let's set that aside like we started to do back on page 66 and 67 in the resentment inventory. And if I didn't do it enough, set aside the harm they did to me. If I didn't do it enough in 4, 9, getting ready for 9 helps me recover that. We're not saying other people didn't do us harm. We're not here to get their spiritual awakening. We're here to grow our spiritual awakening and clear away the debris from in us, no matter what they did. And that's why the forgiveness is so important. We're still not too keen, he says, about admitting our faults to them. Well, no, I'm not going to jump up and down and say I can't wait to go to her and admit my wrong. He doesn't say you're going to like this all the time. He doesn't even say you're going to feel comfortable with this all the time. But what set of risks do you want to participate in? What set of risks do you want to participate in? Do I want to continue to participate in the set of risks that go with me refusing to make amends to them until they make amends to me? Suffering from the spiritual poison of my resentment because I refuse to make amends to her until she cleans up her act, not only makes amends to me, but burrows in the ground at my feet, begging as she grovels, begging for my forgiveness. So I'm putting my spiritual awakening in her hands again. We may not be too keen about going to them. I'd rather manage a set of risks today. I'd rather participate in the set of risks that include go to them and make the amend no matter what they do to me, no matter how they feel about me, no matter what they say about me when I'm done. I choose spiritual freedom over the bondage of self. Every choice I try to make today, not only in step 9, every choice I make in my life today, I try to choose the path of spiritual freedom and the risks of the unknown that go with that, as opposed to the path of spiritual unfreedom, bondage of self, and the risks that go with that I really know about. And he admits on page 77, I quote, "It's harder to go to an enemy," and he says it's much more beneficial to us. See, that's the spiritual mystery. The more difficulty I have with making an amend to a particular person, when I ask God for the help, when I ask God to help me be forgiving, when I ask God for the willingness to go to him anyway, no matter what they've stopped or not done for us, I benefit. It's a mystery, but it's real. So if you're one of those people that's struggling, even if you put the name on step 8, and even if you've been praying on step 8, but you cannot imagine how you can go to that person and make an amend because of what they did to you, talk to your sponsor, pray to the God of your understanding, and ask yourself one more time, do I want to live in the fruit of my spiritual awakening, or do I want to continue to live in the bondage of self that I'm responsible for because I'm not willing to let go of that person's mental control of my life? Because that's what we're doing when we hold on to the anger and the resentment and the refusal to make an amend to them for the part we played. We are choosing to keep ourselves in a bondage of self. And so he says near the bottom of page 77, we go to the person we hated. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit. That's an attitude. That's an inside me. That's a being thing. Before I do the thing, before I do the amend, I'm being different because of my prayers and my forgiveness in step 4. God save me from being angry. God remove my fear. God help me set new ideals. God help me. God help me. God help me. If I started doing that back in step 4 on page 67, I can more easily do it by the time I get to page 77. I go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, expressing our regret. I was wrong when I did this to you. By the way, that's an amend. I was wrong when I did this to you. That's a complete amend. It doesn't need an explanation. It doesn't need a timeline. It doesn't need rationalization, justification, and explanation. It's an admission. I was wrong when I did this to you. Notice, if you haven't done so lately, review the forgiveness guidelines from step 4. It's on page 3 of this outline as a reminder. Forgiveness restores the relationship. It does not eliminate consequences. The fact that I forgive them doesn't let them off the hook for anything they did to me. Forgiveness is not about letting them off the hook. It's about me letting go of my resentment. I'm the beneficiary of my forgiveness. They may or may not benefit. Under no condition, page 77, under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. See how much restraint is built into step 9. Oh, I want to criticize them. I want to work my amend around to where I can be throwing darts into them every 13 seconds. He said, don't do that. Not only is it not considerate, not only is it irresponsible, it's not going to help me. I will feel worse when I do that than before I did it. You may wonder how I know that. I've done amends where I turned it into a dart game at the saloon. But you try to slip it in so they don't know you're doing it. They know you're doing it. And in case I didn't get the point, he says further on page 77, we are there to sweep off our side of the street. There's the debris thing again. Cleaning me out. Independent of what they did or independent of what they're still doing. Independent of the look on their face. And then finally on page 78, his faults are not discussed. You think he's making his point enough here? This isn't about them. This is about being considerate to them so I can be free of the bondage of self, of the harms I did to them, and the residual guilt, regret, remorse, shame that I'm feeling from it. And then I love this on page 78. Sometimes it may not go too well, and I quote, if someone does throw us out of his office, oh well, if someone does throw us out of we have done our part. Their approval is not a condition of a successful amend. Their understanding is not a condition for a successful amend. My thoroughness and honesty and responsibility and consideration are the conditions for a successful amend. Their response has nothing to do with it. Now, most of the time, they're appreciative, they're grateful. Some of them are very complimentary. But I have an acquaintance who went to make an amend to a person, and after making a heartfelt 20-minute amend, the other person looked across the table in a restaurant and said, you want to make an amend to me? You need to die. Now, I think that was heartfelt on their part. Cruel, rather unforgiving. But you know what? My acquaintance got up and left. She made her amend. She'd done her part. The other person's, now it took her a little while to get over that. But she had done her part. In step 9, folks, watch this. This is based on the first 8 steps. We don't start with step 9. We work up to this. In step 9, I am now responsible to make considerate amends. That means taking their feelings into account, not throwing them under the bus, not blaming them, not blaming somebody else. I am responsible to make considerate amends to every person in each category in that big book. Quote, except when to do so would injure them or others. And let's talk a little bit about what that means here. If the risk of harm exists, which could be the case, particularly in a really, really, really broken relationship, it may just be too scary to go back and, what if you had a restraining order against them? That's how dangerous they were. Keep in mind, injure them or others includes me. I'm part of others. So if there's physical risk, if there's physical harm, danger involved, probably not a good idea to do the direct amend. Be willing to do it in 8. Make the direct amend to your sponsor on their behalf. Become free of the shame, regret, remorse, and guilt. Don't have to make a direct amend if it's dangerous for them or for you. Ask God, pray to God, and talk to your sponsor about it. There are some people on my 8-step list, going back quite a few years, that I never have made direct amends to for, except when to do so would injure them or others. I'm totally willing to make the amend. Of course, you live as long as I do. Most of them have died, so. But don't think you can't get the relief of the direct amend. Get to most of the relief in step 8 and talking to your sponsor about it. Bottom of page 76, the sneaky little sentence. If we haven't the will to do this, do what? Make the list in step 8 and make the direct amend in step 9. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Ask who? God. How long does it take for it to come? Well, some of the names it comes right away. I can't wait to get it over with. Some of it takes a little longer. Some of it takes a lot longer. We ask until it comes. Nowhere does it say we stop asking. If you stop asking, you've left the big book. You may have left the train of recovery. You may have left the promises on the station platform and then wonder 3 weeks from now why you don't feel better. We ask until it comes, whatever it takes, as long as it takes. It's okay to scream at your sponsor and say how frustrated you are that you're not willing yet. That's fine. Your sponsor can handle it. They need the help anyway. When you're screaming at them, they're not thinking about their stuff. You may wonder how I know that. But we don't stop asking God for the willingness. In fact, you're going to find out in step 10 and step 11 and step 12, we never stop asking God for the willingness. Most of our praying going forward is going to be centered around, grant me the willingness. Thy will, not mine, be done. How does that sound? That's a willingness prayer. Little sentence, bottom page 76. Easy to slip right by it. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. That's recovery, folks. Not just in step 9. I use this prayer in step 9 for every direct amend I make, as well as these other prayers that are scattered through the next few pages. On page, I talk about page 67, forgiveness begins back in the resentment inventory. God saved me from being angry. It gets repeated again when we said on page 77, go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit. That began back on page 67. He says on page 78, we must lose our fear of creditors. I started praying back on page 68. God, remove my fear. Now I just have a specific target for it. Remove my fear of creditors. Admit and become willing to make a repayment plan. Page 79, ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing. That's an echo of the consideration prayer on page 69. We are willing, page 79. Page 79, he was perfectly willing to go to jail. Now, it turned out he didn't have to. He figured out a way to make the amend and not go to jail. But if that's what it took, not just to not drink, if that's what it took to grow his spiritual life, he was willing to go to any length. Page 80, ask God to help. Once again, consideration. I can't be considerate without God's help. I can't be considerate in step 9 without God's help. I can't be considerate with you today without God's help. It's just a lot easier for me to ask for God's help today, and it's a lot more likely I'm going to receive it and accept it and use it today. Page 80, place the outcome in God's hands. Look at these prayers. Notice how we've moved from self to God and others, just like the humility definition promised us. God willing, it should not be repeated, page 81. And then on page 82, this is about the couple getting back together, the healing of the marriage relationship. Each might pray that the other one's happiness is uppermost in mind. Wow. Thinking of others in a healthy way without becoming a doormat, without losing myself in the process. So it boils down to this. In step 9, we're now through the first 9 steps. We're in the process of making direct amends. We've built our spiritual platform on which we're going to live one day at a time moving forward. Step 10, step 11, and step 12, repeat the principles we learn in steps 1 through 9. There are no really new principles. We see love and tolerance summarized in step 10, but when we look back next time from step 10, we're going to see love and tolerance started back in step 1 and 2. There are no new principles in step 10, 11, and 12 that haven't already been presented to us, offered to us, given to us in steps 1 through 9. So in step 9, I am making direct amends responsibly, where possible and safe, to each person I harm by my wrong actions. I make my direct amends considerately, with a forgiving and non-critical attitude, offering to make restitution where possible. We talked about faith without works is dead. That was one of the first things Bill read today. You look back over your first 9 steps, my faith and works. I've been working in faith, having faith in my work since I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous and admitted I need help in step 1. My faith and works in steps 1 through 9 have enabled me in a healthy way to stop separating myself from God, to stop separating myself from me, and to stop separating myself from you. And I'm going to live based on those principles one day at a time going forward in step 10, 11, and 12. Thank you. And yes, we have a few observations today. I'm going to go through them quickly, Mike. Observations on responsibility and consideration in step 9. Number 1, I ask God to relieve me of the bondage of self in step 3. I ask God in step 4 to save me from being angry, thy will be done, to avoid retaliation and argument, to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. That's back in the 4th step. Kind of gets echoed in step 9, doesn't it? I take responsibility to continue this prayer for a forgiving attitude in my considerate step 9 direct amends. We're not asked to start this whole behavior fresh in step 9 if we're doing the prayers that go along with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And yes, a lot of it centers on willingness. Second observation, the forgiveness reminder. Back on page 66, we began to, this is a quote from the Big Book, all 4 editions. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. How could we escape, letting them live rent-free in my head? How could we escape the wrongdoing of others? We could not wish it away. Well, starting on page 67 and continuing through step 9, forgiveness, which is a big piece of consideration, means, as I begin to pray, God save me from being angry. First, I need to dial back the anger so that I can let God fill me with some forgiveness. Forgiveness begins with God save me from being angry, which means I can begin to develop a forgiving attitude while I'm still angry. I made a mistake for years of thinking I have to stop being angry before I can be forgiving. Guess what? If you're like me, you never stop being angry, and so you never really become forgiving. Did not realize I was blocking myself from the sunlight of spirit by doing that. I thought I was keeping them in the penalty box. They didn't know they were in the penalty box. They were out there living happy, joyous, and free, driving me crazy. How can you be having such a good time when I know you're such a jerk? Yeah, they don't care. They don't even know. Forgiveness does not pretend that harm wasn't done. I'm not pretending they didn't do something that hurt me, harmed me, maybe really threatened me. Forgiveness doesn't mean that harm wasn't done. It doesn't mean the harm didn't hurt. And it doesn't mean there are no consequences for them. Keep in mind, forgiveness is to restore the possibility of the relationship. Forgiveness does not relieve consequences. it does mean the consequences to the wrongdoer are not my responsibility. I'm not the judge. I'm not the jury. I'm not the hangman. Forgiving them does not relieve them of the consequences. It means I'm not responsible for the consequences in their life. I'm here for my spiritual freedom. I'm here to get relief from the bondage of self. And to do that, I have to let go of the harm other people did to me. And that's forgiveness. And I know it doesn't sound fair, but that's because it's my view, not God's view. God knows better. God says, trust me, forgive them. I'll help you get along. Basically, God is saying, you forgive them, I'll help you get along without your resentment. And I say, it's not possible. God says, try me, prove me wrong. Forgiveness does not let them off the hook. I never had them on the hook in the first place. That's just another illusion of mine. Forgiveness does do this. Forgiveness restores me to health, whether the relationship continues or not. I made direct amends to a lot of people and never saw them again, and that's okay. We went our separate ways for all kinds of reasons. But it restored my ability to have a healthy relationship, if not with them, with someone else. And forgiveness clears my emotional vision, if I can call it that. Forgiveness clears my emotional vision so that I can take responsibility for my part, let them go, give them and their part to God, and move on with my healthy life. Okay, watch this next one. This sounds easy. I am responsible to stop separating myself from God. I may not be able to grow my relationship with God as much as I'd like to, but I have to begin with the willingness to stop separating myself from God. And that began back in step 1, 2, and 3. And I suggest if you look carefully at the work and the prayer in each step includes a little bit more of me not separating myself from God. I'm responsible for that. I'm also responsible to stop doing my part to separate me from me. Which means I have to accept my shortcomings as well as all my virtues and gifts. I have to accept all of me. Step 7 calls it the good and the bad. Give it all to God. And let God rework it. Let God restore it. Let God give it back to me on God's terms, not my terms. And I'm definitely responsible for my part to stop separating myself from others. I seek God's help to relieve me of my unforgiving nature every day, not just in step 9. I seek God's help to stop separating myself from God with my self-will run riot, my got to do it my way. I no longer separate from myself because of guilt and remorse. I admit when I've done something wrong, don't have to have the guilt. Admit I can do better next time. Get past the remorse. Don't separate myself from others because of fear and anger. Fear of what they're going to think of me, anger about what they're not doing for me. I may consider it step 9 direct amend because I found out I'm the beneficiary when I consider you. You are too, but I'm the beneficiary when I bring consideration of you into my daily relationship equation. In my spiritual awakening, I find that my responsibility is, in fact, my ability to respond to God's ability. Somebody said, what do you say? In my spiritual awakening, my responsibility is, in fact, my ability to respond to God's ability. I don't do this on my own. I got over the idea that I could do it on my own. In step 9, the greater the harm someone has done to me, the more I need God's ability to get over my hurt and my anger and my judgment and my resentment. I need God's ability to help me forgive them with consideration and make my direct amends and become free of my guilt and my regret and my remorse and my guilt and my shame. Responsibility is my ability to respond to God's ability. So what's my application of responsibility in step 9? 4 things, I think. Yours may be more or less. These are mine. My application of responsibility in step 9. Number 1, admit my wrong. Directly to the person I harmed, except when to do so would injure them or others, including the harm and loss I caused them by the wrong thing I did. Just admit it. I was wrong when I did so-and-so, and I regret the harm and the loss it caused you. Attempt to make restitution for the loss, where possible. To repair the harm and restore the loss. That's only fair. Number 3, commit with God's help, that I won't do this again. I will not steal your car again. I will not lie to you again. On and on and on and on. And number 4, do not attempt to rationalize or justify my actions based on drinking or anything else. I may have a shortcoming I use to explain why I did it, but that's not a justification for it. And I listen to their response without rebuttal. They have a right to say whatever they want to say. It's not a debate. I'm not in this to win points in the debate. I make my amend, and I shut up, and I listen, and I thank you very much, and I leave. I encourage the men I sponsor, when you're making a direct amend, even to a family member that you live with, make the direct amend, listen to whatever their response is, and do not get in another conversation about buying breakfast cereal or painting the dining room. Get up and leave the room. Make a physical separation at the end of the amend. Now, you may walk back in 5 minutes later and resume that conversation, but make it clear the amend is a freestanding, 100% complete deal. Don't let the amend get blended into some other conversation and the entire amend is lost. Listen politely. When they're done, say thank you very much. Literally stand up and leave the room. Nicely, not in a huff. My application of consideration in step 9. Number 1, we saw this on page 77 and throughout the essay. Avoid the other person's wrongdoing, period. Don't justify my actions based on their wrongdoing. Oh, no matter how tempting it is. You're making your amend, they've kind of softened up, you can tell they're kind of, oh, well, maybe he's not so bad. And you hit them with the wrong thing they did. No! You may feel that way. Don't do that. You may wonder how I know that. Backfire. Don't water down my amends based on my pain for their wrongdoing. Don't let self-pity dilute the effectiveness of my amend. Don't involve others. You're making an amend for a bank robbery. Don't involve the other 2 people. And number 4, in application of consideration, it's okay to ask for their forgiveness. Wherever appropriate, talk to your sponsor about it before you do it. But it's okay to ask for their forgiveness without any expectation of them giving it. I had to add that part, didn't I, Kathy? It's okay to ask for their forgiveness with no expectation of them giving it. That takes a little more willingness, prayer. I'm responsible to consider ways my direct amends would injure them or others. Here's a few. Naming someone else without their permission. Can't do that. Naming a partner in an affair. Never a good idea. Putting myself or another person at physical risk. Those are just 3 examples that come to mind. And then finally in step 9, I take my 9th risk. We've been talking about risk in each of these steps as we went along. In step 9, I take a 9th risk in my spiritual awakening and my recovery from alcoholism. I risk trusting God. I risk trusting God to help me admit my shortcoming to others, some of whom I really don't want to make it. I really don't want to make this direct amends. I risk trusting God to help me. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding, to not fear how the other person is going to judge me, and to not be angry at their response, whatever it might be, to my direct amend. We find on page 83, as we come off of the 9th step, and this will be our introduction to next week in step 10 and going forward, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. I would suggest to you the first 8 steps obviously are vital. They're important. They're in order for a reason. But when we go out from here, when we go out and start to make direct amends to others, we've started living the spiritual life on a whole new plane, a whole new risky body of activity, and we find out how much God can help us in that process. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. So next time, we'll continue with our 2 magnificent standards, humility and responsibility, with the attributes of love and tolerance in step 10. Thank you all very much.
Well done, William.
And yes, I have a prayer.
Okay.
Today we're going to read the promises that follow step 9. They're not the only promises in the book, but I'm going to make these a prayer, and I hope it's appropriate for you all today. God, I believe. Bottom of page 83, if you want to follow along, folks. I'm going to paraphrase just a little bit. God, I believe that when I am painstaking about this phase of my development, I am going to be amazed. I'm going to know a new freedom from the bondage of self and a new happiness, whether people are behaving my way or not. I will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I will comprehend the word serenity, and I will begin to know peace. God, I believe that no matter how far down the scale I have gone, you will show me how my experience can benefit others. I've already begun to realize that my feeling of uselessness and self-pity is disappearing. I'm losing interest in selfish things. I'm gaining interest in my fellows. I guess self-seeking is slipping away, God. I know my whole attitude and outlook upon life is changing. Fear of people is leaving me. Fear of economic insecurity is leaving me. I guess this is what you call intuition, because I'm beginning to intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. God, I realize you are doing for me what I could never do for myself. And I believe these promises will continue to materialize. They will continue to grow in my life when and if I'm willing to continue to work for them. Thank you, God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much. And okay, let's have everybody unmute and thank the speaker.
Thank the speaker.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Blessings.
Thank you,
Bill.
Bill.
Bill, thank you so much.
Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you,
God
Bill.
bless you.
Amazing as always.
Thank you,
Bill.